على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Today we commence the 16th juz, which begins with the last portion of Surah Al-Kahf. And we had reached that point in Surah Al-Kahf where the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr is mentioned. There is a difference of opinion regarding whether Khidr is a prophet or not. It is very likely that he was a prophet because he was receiving instructions from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as the story goes, where Musa alayhi salam gave a speech, and after this somebody from Bani Israel came and asked him who was the most knowledgeable person in the world, and he said, it is I. And this was in fact the truth, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would like that knowledge be left up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instead of a person saying that I am the most knowledgeable person. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to him that there is someone who has knowledge of things that you do not know. This story is mentioned in detail in the hadith of Bukhari, and Musa alayhi salam immediately felt that this was a sign for him, a hint for him. And he said, oh Allah, show me the way to that person. I will find that person, I will take from their knowledge and benefit from them. So he took his disciple Yusha ibn Nun alayhi salam, referred to as Joshua, and they traveled and they met this person by the name of Khidr. Now Musa alayhi salam requested to stay in his company. Khidr said that you will not be able to be patient with me. These are the words used, إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا. You will not be able to be patient. He didn't say that you will not be patient or you don't have the patience. You will not be able to. Why? Because you're going to see some things that contradict the laws and rules that have been revealed to you. And it is not possible for you to be patient after seeing something like that. So what Khidr was saying was a practical thing. He wasn't being stubborn or arrogant or trying to tease him that no, you don't have what it takes. He was stating a fact that no, you will not be able to withstand these things. Musa alayhi salam, however, insisted, and he said, I'm not going to ask you anything as per the terms dictated by Khidr. We learn a lot of things about the relationship between teacher and student from this story. One is the search and the desire to go and acquire knowledge from someone who knows more. And the second thing is to undertake journeys and or to undertake sacrifices for the sake of acquiring knowledge for that person. And thirdly, acquiring the knowledge based on the terms of the teacher, not on the terms of the student. The student should not be dictating the terms, the teacher should be dictating the terms through which the exchange of knowledge will take place, because the teacher is the one who is giving the knowledge. And then the teacher provides some of the knowledge, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up certain things to the student as well, based on the level of sincerity and the level of adherence to the adab and the etiquettes that are required in this process, because the knowledge that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in fact very sacred. It must be acquired with certain etiquettes. In any case, the journey starts and they board a ship, and Khidr takes an axe to the one of the planks of the ship and tears it out. Musa alayhi salam is upset. This is somebody else's property. How can you damage someone's property for no reason? They didn't do anything wrong to you. They gave you a free ride, in fact, across the water. And Khidr warns him. He said, didn't I tell you that إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا, that you will not be able to be patient with me? He says, okay, fine, don't hold me responsible this time. Give me another chance. And when they reached dry land, they were walking and they saw a young boy, and Khidr went and killed that boy. So Musa alayhi salam was infuriated. He said, how could you do something like this? An innocent child, you just took his life. And again, Khidr admonished him. He said, I told you, you will not be able to be patient with me. And then Musa alayhi salam realized that, look, he signed up for this. He agreed to this term. So now he has to abide by it. So he knows he's breaking the terms, or he's unable to cope with what he is seeing as his teacher told him. So he says, okay, fine, give me one last chance. If I ask you about anything again, then you can let me go. You can send me away. And so they're going through this region where by now they've been traveling for several days, and they're extremely hungry and thirsty. And they sought some kind of accommodation there, but they were not accommodated. Now, after this, Khidr sees a wall about to collapse, and he goes and starts repairing it. And he fixed it and set it so that the wall was straight again. So Musa alayhi salam said, well, if you wanted, you could have asked for some compensation for this. If you're going to do a good deed for someone, it's a favor that you're doing. but these people haven't shown you any favor. You are in need right now. You could have said, okay, fine, I'll fix this wall for you if you give us some food and drink. So Khidr said, this is it. This is the end of our journey together. Now our ways must part. But before you go, I'm going to explain to you what happened. And he says, that ship that we were on, that nice, new ship that we had boarded, it belonged to poor people. It was jointly owned by a large group of poor people who had invested in it. And on the other side was a ruler who would keep an eye out for all the nice boats, and he would take them. He would take them away from people and not give them a chance to do anything. That's it, forcefully take it. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to introduce a flaw into that boat. So when he sees it, he'll say, oh, it's got a panel missing from it. It doesn't even look good. So I don't want this one. But that panel could have very easily been replaced afterwards. But it saved the people their ship. So this was the reason behind it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me this instruction to do this, to save this person. And that boy, his parents were believers, they were pious people, but we feared that this boy is going to grow up to become a tyrant, and he is going to he's going to be a disbeliever, and he's going to cause a great deal of trouble for his parents and for the rest of the world. So we wanted Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to exchange them with another child that was better than him, even purer, more innocent, and better at taking care of its parents. And later on, as the riwayat mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave those parents a daughter, and that daughter gave birth to prophets. And that wall, I wasn't just fixing that wall randomly because it was collapsing, but in fact it was the property of 2 orphans. And beneath that wall, a treasure of those orphans was buried. If that wall had collapsed, people would have discovered the treasures and they would have taken them. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made this arrangement. Why? Because their father was a pious person. Because their father was pious, I was commanded to look after the interest of their children. So I repaired that wall so that it does not collapse. Later on, when they receive the instructions that were left for them by their father, they will discover that treasure and they will use it by themselves. So what was all of this? Why these things that appear to be very, very wrong? Mufassirin explain that one is a system of the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that pertain to human beings, do's and do nots. Those rules are they're shamil, they apply to everyone. These are the boundaries in which human beings must spend their lives. Then there are instructions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, the taqdeer of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through which Allah acts. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses angels for those things. When is it going to rain? Now it has nothing to do with our sharia. When is it going to rain or not? That's a decision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are not responsible for when it rains, when it doesn't rain. Are the crops going to grow or are the crops not going to grow? Is someone going to be born? Is someone going to die? Someone going to be healthy? They're going to be sick. Someone's going to be prosperous or they're going to be miserable. These are decisions passed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the heavens, and most of these decisions are carried out through the medium of angels. In this case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given knowledge of all of these happenings to one of his slaves, and that was the Prophet. It was a human being. And those duties that were carried out by those angels, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given Khidr alayhi salam some of those duties, and he was receiving direct commands from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this was a system not taught to Musa alayhi salam, nor was he responsible for it, nor is anyone responsible for it, because it pertains to the decrees of Allah, the laws, the happenings of the world, of the universe. It's called the system of taqween. So that was the knowledge that Musa alayhi salam in fact did not have. That is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to his angels to carry out those duties. So that was something that was introduced to Musa alayhi salam, and the fact that he was a human being carrying out those instructions, it was unacceptable to Musa alayhi salam, because human beings are responsible for staying within those limits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set for all of humanity. So how could this person go and do those things? Well, because this Prophet Khidr was under the system of taqween. He was receiving direct instructions from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to carry out those things. Just like there are angels that are taking people's ruh, and there are angels that are coming and breathing ruh into the fetus, which results in a live baby. And there are angels which are in charge of so many different things. So that it was opening up something of that to Musa alayhi salam. This discussion that Khidr was a prophet is necessary, it's relevant, because some people, some ignorant people, have taken this story and stories like it to try to come up with this concept that the awliya Allah are exempt from the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, a person can go and get so close to Allah, they can reach a point where now the rules no longer apply. Now they don't have to pray, or now they don't have to come to the masjid, or now certain things don't apply because they've reached that stage now where they are just absolved of everything. And they use stories like this. But it's a complete misunderstanding of the Quran and misinterpretation of the Quran. Khidr was a prophet. He would only be allowed to do that if he was receiving a direct command of Allah. If Musa alayhi salam had not been told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I have taught him, I teach this person, I give him instructions, Musa alayhi salam would have finished that person. He wouldn't have allowed him to continue. Musa alayhi salam knew that he's receiving these instructions. Now someone might say, well, awliyaullah also receive instructions. Remember one thing, that what a prophet receives is wahi. The prophet has no choice but to follow that wahi. And the wahi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to a prophet is absolute. What awliyaullah, or people that are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, feel in the sense of ilham, or things that they might see in the form of kashf, these do not have any bearing on sharia, nor can any command of sharia be compromised by this. In fact, not even any sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam can be compromised by this. Kashf and ilham are not a hujjah. They are not any kind of a proof or evidence based on which a person can make decisions that compromise or that contradict the sharia. So there is no such concept that a person becomes so close to Allah that now concessions are given to them, that now you don't have to do this. You have these people, these jahil Sufis, they say, oh, well, someone says, well, aren't you going to come to the masjid? No, our salat is in the Kaaba. So this is ignorance, this is jahala. And it was to battle wrong types of thoughts like this that people like Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah stood up and played a very important role. People criticize Ibn Taymiyyah for some of his views. Not all of his views are accepted by the mainstream ummah, but he played a very important role in calling these people out that this is false. There is no basis for this kind of stuff. And what they had done is they had turned Sufism into cults. They had completely, they were exploiting it to make parties and groups and to get financial gains and to win fame and fortune and influence over people through this. And everyone was very much concerned by keeping people within that cult. And people were formally indoctrinated into that cult. And instead of giving them education of Quran and Hadith and Sunnah through those Sufi ways, they were just giving them these special kinds of things to read and special kind of a dress that you have to wear. And that's it. Your loyalty is only to your shaykh. And it doesn't matter what you read in Hadith and what you read in Quran. None of that applies. Just do whatever he's saying. So he called this out. Similarly, in India, Mujaddid al-Fithani rahmatullah alayhi, Shaykh Ahmad Sarhindi rahimahullah, he is called the Mujaddid of the second millennia because he revamped and restructured this whole system of tasawwuf that people had started exploiting and just turning it into, nothing more than commerce. It was commerce and it was business. And every khanqah, every place where there was some kind of a gathering of this taking place, it was just being exploited. People's pockets were being exploited and their deen was being taken away from them. So yes, there is something called tasawwuf. It's something very real. It's just the essence of the teachings of Quran and Hadith. But it does not mean that now people start getting exceptions and exclusions for themselves. Anyway, that discussion was necessary because people use this story of Khidr. They say it's in the Quran. After this is discussion of Dhul Qarnayn. Now there are misconceptions about Dhul Qarnayn as well. The biggest misconception is people equate him with Alexander the Great. So Alexander the Great lived a couple of centuries before Isa alayhi salam. And he was the son of Philip and he was the student of Aristotle. Okay, he was from Macedonia. He either did not have any religion or he just followed the way of the philosophers. And he in many ways was a very tyrant king. He was not a Muslim. Many historians say that he worshipped idols. They had their own pagan faith that they adhered to, and that's what they. So there is no way historically or logically that Dhul Qarnayn could be Alexander the Great. Okay, Alexander the Great was a mushrik. He was a tyrant king. He had nothing to do with Deen or Islam, and there is no reason for him to be mentioned in the Quran. Nor does he fall into the time frame that Dhul Qarnayn was in. Dhul Qarnayn was around at the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, who was several thousand years before Isa alayhi salam. So the time timelines do not match, the time frames do not match. They're off by a couple of millennia. So these two things should never be joined together. Some say that he accepted Islam at the hands of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Others say that he was a pious king at the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam who did a great deal of good work. And he performed Hajj with Ibrahim alayhi salam. And his origins were from Yemen, from the kings of Himyar, and he was one of the Tubba'as. There are different names, titles given to kings of different regions, like Pharaoh to the region of Egypt, and Najashi or Negus to the region of Abyssinia, and Kisra to the region of Persia, and Qaisar to the region of Rome. Similarly, Tubba was the name given to the king or the ruler of the region of Yemen and that whole part of the world, that whole part of the Middle East. So he was one of the Tubba'as, or he was the first of the Tubba'as. And we find mention of him in the poetry of the following of the later Tubba'as. They talk about their forefather Dhul-Qarnayn, who did this and this and this, and then talk about his generosity, they talk about his bravery, and they talk about how he ruled a great portion of the world. So this is enough for us. This is enough for us. This is sufficient. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning him in the Quran not to talk about stories, but because this was one of the questions that was posed to the Prophet ﷺ, that tell us about him, if you know about him. So the word Qarnayn means either two horns or it means 2 centuries. He was born at a time, or he lived long enough that his rulership lasted for 2 centuries or over 2 centuries, or part of 1 century and part of the next century. So because he had rulership in both, he was called the person of 2 centuries. Or some say it's Qarnayn because he had 2 horns or 2 bumps sticking out of his head. Some say that this refers to 2 horns that he had on his crown, or 2 spikes that he had on his crown. Some say it refers to 2 locks that he had coming down. It doesn't really matter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has called him, referred to him as Dhul Qarnayn. So I will tell you some of the things. Sa'atlu alaykum minhu dhikra. I will mention some pertinent things about him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had makkannahu fil ard. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him great power. And ataynahu min kulli shay'in sababa. He had access to every kind of resource. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us. So he was a very powerful and a mighty ruler. Fatba'a sababa. He followed one path until he reached Maghrib al-Shams. He reached a western area where the sun was setting. He reached the place where the sun sets and saw it setting in Pi'ain Hamia, in a dark, murky stream. So there is some place where there's a body of water, where there was a pond or a lake or a river or a stream, which was muddy and its water was muddy and murky. And what happened there? There were some people there. Obviously, there were some people there that were causing trouble, and Dhul Qarnayn was called there, summoned there to make a decision. قُلْنَا يَا ذَا الْقَرْنَيْنِ. We said, "Oh Dhul Qarnayn." So this is Allah saying, speaking to Dhul Qarnayn. What does this mean? So it means that either he was also a prophet, or there was a prophet that was with him, conveying to him the instructions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to him. It's one of these 2 things. Either you punish them, or you can treat them nicely and kindly. So he said, no, I'm not going to do one or the other. I am going to look at the actions of individuals. So it tells us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him the ability to discern and rule with justice as well. He said, no, I'm going to look at each person's actions and treat them accordingly. Those that really did wrong, they caused a lot of trouble. Apparently there were some people that were causing it was like an anarchist movement. They were rebelling and they were destroying crops and killing people, and it was just mass destruction that they were causing. So he said, I want to identify those individuals, and those that have done that, they will be punished. And then on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish them again. And those who are doing good deeds, I'm going to make sure that they're not included in that and unfairly or unjustly sentenced to death. I am going to treat them kindly, and I'm going to speak good words to them as well. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him off on another mission, and this time it was to the extreme east. And what happened there, the Quran doesn't mention. It just says that there were people, the sun was rising over people that had no cover from the sun. So what's the relevance of that? Perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him there to provide means of shelter for them, to construct homes and structures for them. This is one hypothesis. The other is that perhaps the same kind of situation that had arisen in the west had arisen in the east, and he was there to stop that, and the same kind of decision was made. But because it was already mentioned in the previous passage, it was not repeated in the next sentence. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him on another path, and there he reached between as-saddain, between 2 mountains or between 2 cliffs. So 2 walls of rocky mass. And On this side, before these mountains, there was a group of people that it appeared that they could not understand anything. In other words, they did not speak his language. He did not understand what they were saying. They could not understand what he was saying. But they managed to convey their complaint to Dhul Qarnayn. They said, this nation of Ya'juj and Ma'juj have caused great trouble in the world. They've caused great trouble. So what is Ya'juj and Ma'juj? Ya'juj and Ma'juj is what is normally translated in English as Gog and Magog. These are these people, or this nation is mentioned, or some say they're individuals. Gog, they say Gog is the person, Magog is the place that he was from, and this later evolved in biblical writings to Gog and Magog, that they were two different people, and then they started being referred to as tribes, as nations. So what we do know is that these were not Arab people, nor is the word Ya'juj and Ma'juj an Arab word. It has been Arabicized from another language. Could be the ancient Russian languages. It could be a language that was spoken in Eurasia, which is most likely where these people existed and exist, in the steppes of Eurasia. They said, can we give you a bounty, just so that you can create some kind of a barrier between us and them? So what you have is, you have two mountains. Obviously between them is a valley, and before that valley you have this open area where Ya'juj and Ma'juj are. Now Ya'juj and Ma'juj keep coming in and causing destruction, killing people, taking their animals, and destroying their crops, and so on and so forth. So they said, we want to pay you something, we'll give you some kind of a reward, but please make some kind of a barrier, because they keep coming out of their region and destroying us. He said, "Ma makkani fi rabbi khayrun." He said, what Allah has given me is much better than any money that you can offer me. Just help me with manpower. A'inuni bi quwwa. I will need some manpower. I don't need any money from you. You provide the strength, and I will create a wall between you and them. Atuni zubar al-hadid. So he asked for plates of steel or plates of iron, and he blocked off that area between the two cliffs. He completely blocked it off from both sides, and he said, unfukhu, blow, which means apply heat. So heat was applied until the iron became so hot that it became sealed together. Because of the intense heat, those plates got sealed together and became like one big wall. But he didn't stop there. He said, now I want to pour molten copper over it. Atuni ufriq alayhi qitra. So he had copper melted and poured over it to make it even stronger, to fortify it. If there were any cracks or splits in between, to fill that up and to make it extremely slippery so that nobody could cross over it. So now there is no gripping, there is nothing that people can use to get over it, and it's become very, very solid. فَمَسْتَطَاعُوا, and that's what the Quran says, فَمَسْتَطَاعُوا أَن يَظْهَرُوهُ. Neither were they able to cross over it. وَمَسْتَطَاعُوا لَهُ نَقْبًا, nor were they able to drill a hole through it. They were trapped in between. He said, this is the mercy of Allah. You need the ability to construct something like this. This is from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But a time will come when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have this wall just demolished and destroyed, and it will fall apart. Now, who were these people? Some people have made another wrong hypothesis. They say that the Tatars, the Mongolian horde that attacked, we're talking about Genghis Khan and his followers, his descendants, when they spread out from the steppes of Eurasia and caused a lot of destruction. Some people said these were the descendants. These were Ya'juj and Ma'juj. No, that's not correct. They were not Ya'juj and Ma'juj. There could be a crossing in the bloodlines between these people, because these people are human beings. Ya'juj and Ma'juj are not some other creation. They are human beings. They are from the children of Adam alayhi salam. They're from the progeny of Nuh alayhi salam through his son Yafith. And so they are human beings. So the bloodlines could cross. That's completely possible. But the Ya'juj and Ma'juj being mentioned here, and those that are mentioned in Surah Al-Anbiya, حَتَّى إِذَا فُتِحَتْ يَأْجُوجُ وَمَأْجُوجُ وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَمٍ يَنْسِلُونَ, that they will be released close to Qiyamah. The Quran is saying they're going to be released close to Qiyamah. A hadith mentioned in great detail when they will be released, and that will be in the time of Isa alayhi salam. In fact, biblical texts say the same thing, that they're going to be released at that time. So there is no need to equate, the Mongolian horde and say, oh, those were Ya'juj and Ma'juj. That is not the case. So now the question arises that where exactly is this? A general designation has been made, but the specific region is known only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is in the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not to tell us and not to let us know, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends to release these people close to Qiyamah. So the human being can try all they want. It's not necessary for them to find every single spot. Some people have said that in the meantime, many walls were constructed to stop these people because they had gone and attacked many nations, and many such walls have come up. And they say one of those walls is in Derbent, which is in Dagestan. And they say there's another one, another area close to Dagestan towards Azerbaijan. And some have even gone as far as to say that the Great Wall of China was also built to stop the hordes of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Some of those thoughts could be challenged historically because the Great Wall of China is not really that old. If we're talking about Dhul Qarnayn and we're saying he was from the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the Great Wall of China does not date that far back. But some of those walls could be in fact put up to stop, that people had built to stop these Ya'juj and Ma'juj coming, and then Dhul Qarnayn went and sealed them in this massive valley. And when they will be released, we don't know what their numbers are right now, but when they will be released, they will be so numerous in number that the Prophet ﷺ said they will be 999 out of 1,000. Or my ummah, people from my ummah will be one, and the number of Ya'juj and Ma'juj will be 999. That's a huge percentage. It's more than 99%. It's a massive percentage. 99.9% will be Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and 1% will be the rest of the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Khair. So that story is mentioned, and then there is some mention about people how they turn to other slaves instead of turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for friendship and for help. And the greatest loss, the biggest losers in terms of their acts, in terms of the things that they engage themselves in, the biggest losers in that sense on the Day of Judgment will be those whose effort was lost in the world. Dalla sa'yuhum. Their effort was off track. Dalla means to lose track, to go off track. Their effort was off track. In other words, the effort was there. There was effort. There was a great deal of sacrifice. There was a great deal of devotion and dedication and all of those things, but it was in the wrong direction. So they spent their lives thinking يَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ يُحْسِنُونَ صُنْعًا, that they're doing great things, they're achieving great things, but on the Day of Judgment they discovered that none of it was of any value. And the biggest loss would be for those people who kafaru bi ayat rabbihim wa liqa'ihi, who did all of this not even believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the verses, the commands of Allah, not believing in the meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَحَبِطَتْ أَعْمَالُهُم, all of their deeds went to waste. فَلَا نُخِيبُ لَهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ, they won't even need to be weighed. There is nothing to weigh on the Day of Judgment in terms of deeds. And then there is praise and glorification of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so profuse and it is so plenty that if the water of all the oceans was turned into ink and it was used to write praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of that ink would be used up. And if more ink was brought, more oceans were brought, the same volume, and they were also used up, even then the oceans would finish, they would be depleted, but the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not finish. After this is Surah Maryam, another Makki surah. It has 98 verses. And as its name indicates, it is taken from a mention of Maryam radiallahu anha. It starts out with dua of Zakaria alayhi salam. He had grown old and he did not have any heir. He did not have anyone who would take his place in terms of male offspring. And there were other relatives who were anxious to fill his spot and take over whatever. And his concern was, I need somebody behind me, somebody after me who is going to guide people on the right path. So he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the inspiration for this dua is mentioned in Surah Al-Imran. هُنَالِكَ دَعَا زَكَرِيَّا رَبَّهُ. He got inspired to make this dua when he saw Maryam having fruit when it was not the season for that fruit, and that fruit was not available in that area. So he said, oh Allah, if you can give her fruit out of season, then you can give me a child when it's no longer my season to have children. So he turned earnestly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His dua was answered, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala named him Yahya. He said, oh Allah, can I have... First he said, how is this possible when we don't have the means to have children? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, it's going to happen just like that. It's easy for me. I created you out of nothing. When you were nothing, I created you. I can create a son for you as well. So Allah, is there a sign that I can have to know that when that time is going to happen? Because obviously it's going to be a miraculous birth. So miraculous birth means that it could happen suddenly, can I have some kind of a forewarning? So he said, yes, the sign that you will have is that you will not be able to speak for 3 days. That will be the time. Allah tukallim an-nasa thalatha layalin sawiya. For 3 nights consecutively, you won't be able to talk. And so that time came. Now Zakaria alayhi salam had to give his people his instructions. For awha ilayhim, he just motioned to them with his hands using sign language, and sabbihu bukratan wa ashiya, that keep praying morning and evening. In any case, the child was born, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Yahya alayhi salam, khudil kitaba biquwwa. No one before this was named Yahya. Lam naj'allahu min qablu samiyya. The first person to be named Yahya was this prophet. And hold on to the book, the commandments of the book, firmly. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes him. After this is the story of Maryam, of how she was alone, she was in seclusion, and Jibreel alayhi salam came in the form of a human being, and she got scared. She said, if you have any fear of Allah, stay away from me. He said, I'm not a human being. I am a messenger from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the form of a human being. I came to gift you a pure child. She said, how could I possibly have a child? No man has ever touched me. I am not a woman of ill character. He said, that's how it's going to happen. It's going to happen just like this, without you having touched a man. And for Allah, it's easy. And we're going to make him a sign for people, a miracle for people. And he's going to be a mercy from us. And that is something, Amr al-Maqdiyah, has already been decided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Jibreel salam blew. He blew at her, and the child was conceived in her womb. That's it. That's why he's called Ruhullah. He's called Kalimatullah. Allah created him just with the kalima of kun. And the ruh is because his ruh was breathed into his mother's womb just by Jibreel salam, just breathing like that. So she conceived him, and she went off to a distant area. The labor pains forced her to lean against the stump of an old date tree, which was dried up. It was dead, and she was there miserable. She was saying that, I wish I had died before this. I wish people had forgotten me, and they had forgotten that they had forgotten me. Jibreel alayhi salam came to console her. He called her from a distance and said, don't worry, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to produce. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you water. So she looked, and all of a sudden there's a stream of water flowing at her feet. And he said, this tree that you're leaning against, just shake it. And fresh dates started falling. And so that became a source of comfort for her, and nourishment as well. فَكُلِي وَاشْرَبِي وَقَرِّي عَيْنَا. Eat and drink and be happy, and don't worry about people. When people, you're not responsible for answering to people. When you do come across people, tell them that you're fasting. And in that Sharia, they were allowed to fast with a fast of silence. So just like we fast, we are fasting, abstaining from food and drink and so forth. Their fast also included, or it could be specifically just a fast of silence where you don't speak to anyone. So after giving birth to the child, she comes back. Eventually she has to come back to her people. She's carrying the child. They said, what have you done? This is what a scandal. What kind of scandal have you been involved in? And your father was not a bad person. Your mother was not ill-charactered. She did not reply. She just motioned to the child. She pointed towards the child. They said, how do you want us to speak to someone who is just, in its mother's lap? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Isa alayhi salam a tongue. He started speaking, and he started announcing and introducing himself. I am the slave of Allah. Allah has given me the book. He has made me a prophet. He has made me a source of blessing wherever I go. He has commanded me to establish salat, to pay zakat as long as I'm alive. He has commanded me to be kind with my mother. He has not made me harsh. He has not made me wretched. And peace upon me the day that I am born, and the day I will die, and the day that I am resurrected. Allah says, this is Isa alayhi salam. This is the reality of Isa alayhi salam. And hear it from Isa alayhi salam himself. But people took him to be something else. They raised him to a deity. They started worshipping him, and so on and so forth. After this is mention of a few other prophets. Ibrahim alayhi salam, in his discussion with his father, "O father, why are you worshipping something that cannot help you? مَا لَا يَسْمَعُ وَلَا يُبْصِرُ وَلَا يُغْنِي عَنْكَ شَيْءٍ." It doesn't hear you, it doesn't see you, it can't do anything for you. "Oh father, Allah has given me some knowledge that has not reached you. Follow me, I'm guiding you to the right path. Don't follow shaitan," so on and so forth. The father, Azar, was very upset, and he said, "If you don't stop this, I'm going to have you stoned." So this was like one of the first tests of Ibrahim alayhi salam, his father, his own father. His father threatened to have him killed. He said, okay, fine. Then he left them, and after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened up many, many doors for him. Then there's mention of Musa alayhi salam, Ismail alayhi salam, and Idris alayhi salam. Allah says these are the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has favored from the prophets. Min dhurriyyati Adam, they're all the descendants of Adam. Wa mimman hamalna ma'a Nuh, and they come in the progeny of Nuh alayhi salam, those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala carried with Nuh in the ark. So all the prophets are from, obviously, the descendants of those people that were with Nuh alayhi salam on the ark. And after that, the prophets were from the progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And aside from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, all the other prophets were from the progeny of his grandson Israel, meaning Yaqub alayhi salam. But what happened afterwards? These people themselves, these prophets themselves, they were prostrating and they were humble and submissive towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But after them came their descendants, bad descendants, who ruined the salat. They wasted the salat that had been prescribed. They followed their desires, and they were going to end up in Jahannam. And then there is some outcome of those people as opposed to those who stay firm on good deeds. There's a verse here, 64, where the words of Jibreel alayhi salam, when the Prophet said, how come you don't come as frequently as you used to? How come I don't see you? So Jibreel alayhi salam said, وَمَا نَتَنَزَّلُ إِلَّا بِأَمْرِ رَبِّكَ. We can only come with the instruction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't come on our own accord. Then there's mention of how some people don't acknowledge belief in the hereafter. إِذَا مَا مِتُّ لَسَوْفَ أُخْرَجُ حَيًّا. How is it possible after I die that I'm going to be taken out from my grave alive? So challenging that, and what will be the outcome of people. Sometimes people say, look at who we have and look at who you have. When you invite them towards haqq and the truth, they say, أَيُّ الْفَرِيقَيْنِ خَيْرٌ مَقَامٌ وَأَحْسَنُ نَدِيًّا. Which group, which camp has a higher status in society, and who has better gatherings and who is more prominent? So tell them, don't worry about these kinds of things. There were people before you who were destroyed who had even better gatherings and even had higher statuses than you do. So don't use this as the standard. And then there's another discussion about someone who doesn't believe in akhirah. The end of the surah talks about what happens when people ascribe a son to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What happens in the heavens? تَكَادُ السَّمَاوَاتُ يَتَفَطَّرْنَ مِنْهُ. The skies want to split from it. وَتَنْشَقُّ الْأَرْض. The earth wants to open up. وَتَخِرُّ الْجِبَالُ هَدًّا. And the mountains want to collapse. In rage. أَنْ دَعَوْا لِلرَّحْمَنِ وَلَدًا. People dare to say that Rahman has taken a son. وَمَا يَنْبَغِي لِلرَّحْمَنِ أَنْ يَتَّخِذَ وَلَدًا. It is not appropriate for Ar-Rahman to take a son. Why would he need a son? For what? To do what? إِن كُلُّ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ إِلَّا آتِ الرَّحْمَنِ عَبْدًا. Everything in the heavens and the earth will come to him as a slave, nothing more than a slave on the day of judgment. لَقَدْ أَحْصَاهُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has counted and enumerated every single one of them. وَكُلُّهُمْ آتِيهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فَرْدًا. Everyone will have to come individually in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After this is Surah Taha. مَا أَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ لِتَشْقَى. Taha, some say, is one of the names of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and others say it's just from the huruf al-muqatta'at. We have not revealed this Quran to you so that you can be inflicted with hardship. We have not revealed this Quran to you to make you miserable. Some of us have mentioned that this verse was revealed when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to stand up all night in tahajjud until his feet started cracking. His feet started cracking. Some say that his shins started splitting and his feet started bleeding from excessive standing. So we did not reveal the Quran to you for this. إِلَّا تَذْكِرَةً لِمَنْ يَخْشَى. This is a reminder. Then the story of Musa alayhi salam starts from the time of his nubuwah. That occasion close to the mountain of Tur, where he received nubuwah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed them that he had chosen him and gave him some brief instructions, And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took a quick test of Musa alayhi salam, and it was also an instruction, a practical instruction. What's in your right hand, O Musa? So Musa alayhi salam didn't just say it's my stick. He said, it's my stick, I do this and this and this and this with it. He wanted to prolong his discussion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, just throw it, drop it. Musa alayhi salam drops it. Now it's no longer a stick, it's a snake. And the snake is running around. Musa alayhi salam sees it and he runs. Other parts of the Quran mention that walla mudbiran wa lam yu'aqib. He turned his back and he just ran. He didn't look back. Ya Musa, aqbil wa la takhaf. One verse says here, khudha wa la takhaf. Go and grab it and don't be afraid. So you have this massive serpent, you're being told to grab it. San'u'iduha sirataha al-ula. We're going to restore it to its first shape. So Musa alayhi salam goes and grabs it, it turns back into a stick. So it was to show that power is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not in the shapes of things. Things by themselves only have the shape that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants them to have, and they only have the use of benefit and harm that Allah allows them to have. Something of extreme use, like in this case his stick that he was using, he used to lean on it, and he used to shake leaves for his animals for it, and he had many other uses for it, like self-defense and so on and so forth. He had all these uses for it. But that same useful thing became something of extreme harm in the form of that snake. Then it became a snake, and now it's a snake, and now you're running for your life. Allah says, no, it's not a snake, it's whatever we want it to be. Go and grab it. Just because we're telling you, have faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he goes and grabs it, he musters up the courage and goes and grabs it. It's no longer a snake, it's a stick. So something of benefit can be turned into something of harm. And something of harm can be turned to something of benefit by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So don't put your trust or your reliance or your attention on things as they are. Put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Always carry out what He wants you to do. Allah will make things subject to you and subservient to you. The next miracle was that He puts His arm under His other arm, and it comes out shining. He says, okay, now go to Fir'aun. Musa alayhi salam begs and pleads with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, I can't do this alone. I have trouble speaking. He had a speech impediment. Oh Allah, can you please include my brother Harun in this? He begged to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Finally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him this, but not before He told him about all His favors. This is a big favor I'm doing for you. And there are other favors that I've done as well. Like your mother, I inspired her to put you into the water, and then this happened, and this happened, and then you were raised in the house of Fir'aun, and you were protected, and all of these things. Then they went to Fir'aun and they gave him the message, and discussion started. And finally Musa alayhi salam showed him the sign of the stick turning into a snake, and he showed him the sign of the shining hand, and he said, oh, this is magic, we've got better magicians than this, and gathered all the magicians, and they had this big sort of a magic showdown. And of course the stick of Musa alayhi salam turned into that serpent and swallowed all of the things that they had brought. The magicians accept Islam. Fir'aun is extremely upset. He threatens to kill them, to punish them, to destroy them. They say, we don't care. We believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our hearts are content. And your authority only extends to this worldly life. إِنَّمَا تَقْضِي هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا. That's the end of it. Beyond that, you have no influence. So fine, do what you want with us in this dunya. At least we will be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and up to His disposal in the akhirah. And then how Musa alayhi salam was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take his people and leave, and that whole incident of crossing the water and Fir'aun and his armies drowning. After this, Musa alayhi salam is told, Bani Israel is told about some of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There was an incident where Musa alayhi salam was asked to come to Mount Tur for 30 days, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala extended it to 40 days. So he was told to bring some of his people with him. But Musa alayhi salam was in such a rush that he left those people behind, and they said they're coming. So he wanted to get there first. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him, "Ma a'jalaka an qawmika ya Musa? Why have you come before everyone?" So he said that Ajiltu ilayka rabbi litarda. He said that hum ulai ala athri, they're right behind me, and I came rushing to you so that Allah, you'd be pleased seeing my eagerness. Well, you left them behind. You didn't do a good thing. Your job as a prophet is not just to get close to me. Your job is to bring people close to me. Your job is to look out for the people as well. In this time that you have come and left them behind, What happened? Samiri got a hold of them and he led them astray. He created this golden calf for them and he has gotten them to worship it. And some Mufassirin mention that 70,000, some say 700,000 members of Bani Israel became murtad in this time. They left the religion of Musa alayhi salam, started worshipping that calf. Tafsir Madhari gives some details of this. Then the details of what Samiri did, what happened when Musa alayhi salam came back, and then Samiri was banished and he was punished. So this is what a large portion of the surah is devoted to. After this, some descriptions of Yawm al-Qiyamah and the field of Hashr, of the desperateness of people and the fear that will be in people, and how there is not going to be any place that they can go. And at that time, everyone is going to be humble and lowered in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is mention of the story of Adam alayhi salam over here as well, of what happened there with Iblis, and how Iblis led him and his wife to eat the fruit of that tree, and then all of these things happened. The warning for those who turn away from the reminder of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to turn away from the Quran, مَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي, one who turns away from my reminder, فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكَ, he should not think that he's going to have a very good life. People will turn away from the Quran thinking that it has too many restrictions. We want to live a comfortable life. We want to live a life without restrictions. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that anytime you turn away from it, you're going to have a very miserable life, a very difficult life. Dhank means very, very tight, constricted life. You're looking for an open life, but you're going to be constricted. It's true, you're going to be governed by so many things. You're going to be bossed around by so many things. So many things are going to rule you and judge you and dictate what you do and what you don't do, that it's going to lead you to more and more and more misery. Where's all the depression in the world coming from? Where are all the worries coming from? Where's all the stress coming from? Where are all the diseases coming from? Where's all the inner discontent coming from? It's increasing day by day. Restlessness inside, even having everything. Every day you'll read about people, millionaires, going and killing themselves, taking their own lives, taking the lives of other people. Why are they doing this? There's a restlessness inside that simply cannot be quenched by the things of this dunya. And you keep turning towards that thing which causes restlessness, it's only going to increase your restlessness. Person comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, comes to the remembrance of Allah. We read, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ. It is only through the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and through the reminders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the hearts can become content. So that's where we should seek our contentment. And this person is going to be raised blind on the Day of Judgment. He's going to ask Allah, لِمَا حَشَرْتَنِي أَعْمَى وَقَدْ كُنْتُ بَصِيرًا. Oh Allah, you are raising me blind today, but I used to have eyesight. I used to be able to see. So why have I lost them today? He says, well, أَتَتْكَ آيَاتُكَ آيَاتُنَا, our verses came to you, فَنَسِيتَهَا, you neglected them. Today you are going to be neglected. A reminder to not look at the enjoyments that other people have in this world. It is زَهْرَةُ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. It is the glitter of this worldly life, لِنَفْتِنَهُمْ فِيهِ, so that we can test them. وَرِزْقُ رَبِّكَ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. What Allah has in store for you is much better and it is everlasting. And the emphasis on keeping your family close to salah. وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ. Command your family to pray salah. This is important. It's not just by ourselves, our family members, and ahl includes all family members, not just wife and kids. It includes all your family members, brothers and sisters, parents, close relatives. Start with these people. وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَاسْتَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا. And remain steadfast on it yourself. Don't compromise it yourself and try to preach to other people. It's not going to work. لَا نَسْأَلُكَ رِزْقًا نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكَ. Allah is saying to the Prophet, we don't want you to earn. We don't want you to go and earn for people. نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكَ. We are going to provide you. وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلتَّقْوَى. The best results are for piety. And in this manner, we conclude the summary of the 16th juz. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to reflect and take guidance from it. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين.